I want to now introduce a very, very experienced retired airline pilot. He's going to talk about his early career with Ansons, and I'd like you to welcome Brian Floyd.
Thank you, Brian. I'm glad to see Brian Poole has joined us. We've got yet another Brian in our team. There seems to be lots of us. Good afternoon, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a little humiliated speaking before such a distinguished gathering of aviators, but I got talked into this, so I'll do my best. Before I start, I would like those of you who have worked on Ansons as in overhaul and maintenance to put your hands up so that I can get an idea of how much rubbish I can inject into this. How truthful I have to be. Anybody who's worked on Ansons, seriously? Oh, I can say what I like. How many people have flown Ansons?
Oh, look at that. That's amazing.
Better be a bit more careful then.
Isn't that amazing?
I can see one in the room who I've flown in an Anson with, and that's Sid Goddard. Righto, the Avro Anson was, I don't know the name of the designer. Does anybody know the name of the designer of the Anson? I have read it somewhere, but I can't remember. I'm suffering from, doesn't matter. It was model 652A was the one that I was familiar with, the Anson 1, and they were produced initially about mid-1930s. I think it was 34, the first one flew at Woodford, just out of Manchester. My introduction to Ansons, apart from seeing them occasionally flying over in the Mount Lawley district where I lived, was at Triggs, where we had a beach shack, and I was there one day, and 3 of them flew along the coast there, camouflage ones, and models just like that. And yes, just like that. I looked out, and here's 3 of them flying past at about 100 feet, and I thought, wow, this is for me. I've got to fly aeroplanes, and they had gun turrets on like that, and it was very impressive. I sort of started dreaming about flying an aeroplane after that. My first job when I left school, I was just turning 15. I first of all tried to get a job as an apprentice with MMA, and Frank Cahoon, who was the chief engineer there, said no room for you. Go around the corner to ANA, Australian National Airways, DAP section, overhauling Ansons for the Air Force. So they readily gave me a job as a junior worker. And there might be some people in the room who are working there. No? Righto. Some of the people I did work alongside later on flew. I worked on these aeroplanes that were very tired aircraft that came in from Geraldton mainly. Some were camouflage and some were yellow trainers. And they were very, very tired aeroplanes, and the hydraulics in them leaked, and the hydraulic oil in the Anson is a vegetable type, not the mineral as most of us are accustomed to these days. And it would dissolve the dope on the fabric, so the fabric would be loose and hanging down, looking terrible, and they were a real mess. The tyres had double G's all round them. The tyres on the Anson had no tread, they were just smooth ball tyres, and double G's in them from Geraldton. We stripped them down to nothing, right down to the bare airframe. The construction of the Anson, for those who don't know, it's a bicycle tube type frame for the fuselage, and the reformers with brackets and appropriate bolts and screws clipped onto the frame, and then wooden stringers and then fabric on them. It's pretty, you can see it fairly well in that photograph, the stringers pushing out the fabric. Even the fin on it is part of the airframe. It's welded onto the tubular steel fuselage. AID people from the Air Force, Aeronautical Inspectorate Directorate, I think it was. They would come around after we'd used emery cloth and got all the paint off and got them shining, and they had red paint, and they would mark out the parts that were a bit bent or any cracks or anything, and they were cut out. We hacksawed them out and they welded new pieces in. The airframe was virtually a new airframe when it finished. Then the wings went away. They were chopped up and burnt as firewood, I think. And new ones were built by General Motors in their facility down in Solomon Street in Mosman Park. And they were brought into, I used to think that it was, originally I thought they came from the Matilda Bay Brewery, but I found out recently that it was Ford who were in there, and just round the corner was where General Motors were. Anyway, the wings came down on a big jinker to Maylands and were married with the frame, the airframe, fuselage. The wing is attached to the fuselage with a big U-bolt, U-bracket, and bolts 4.5 through the fairly heavy bolts. The wing is entirely made of wood. The wood was glued together with Casco, casein glue, which was made, it was a cold water glue made from the white of an egg. No, that's no joke. Anyway, the glue worked pretty well for a few years until the aeroplanes got into the tropics, and then they started falling apart, as I found out later on. By the time the aeroplanes came out of the production line, which took something like about 5 or 6 months, they were really a new aircraft. The instruments, I was working in the section installing instruments, and we'd take them down to the instrument shop, Tough Instrument Company, who were in Hay and King Street corner there somewhere, I believe. The engines were overhauled by A&A in their engine workshop in Garrett Road in Bayswater. They were virtually a new engine, and the whole lot was put together, and the Air Force people came out, and after they'd been inspected by the AID people, the Air Force people test flew them. I never managed to talk my way into getting a ride for a test flight because I was just a civilian worker and I wasn't in the Air Force. One job that they used me for, because I was quite small then, I was just 15, and they would poke me into a hatchway under there, the small hatch, which is attached with camlock fasteners, and I would be put inside there to do the final lock wiring up of the turnbuckles, and that after the controls were rigged and adjusted. That was my initiation on Avro Ansons, and I did that until one day the war ended and we all got the DCM, don't come Monday. So I thought of Frank Cahoon and zipped round the corner and saw him, and he said, okay lad, you can, everybody was lad in McRoberts and Miller, you can have a job and start as an apprentice on Monday. So I had the weekend off anyway, and I did my apprenticeship with MMA, and I can see a couple of people here who did the same thing. And then while I was doing that, I learned to fly Tiger Moths and got a job flying DC-3s, and reached a stage where I had enough experience to learn to fly an Anson. And I was converted onto the Anson by Alec Whittam. Alec Whittam was the chief pilot of MMA at the time. Some of you no doubt know him, very nice man. And we did several circuits at Guildford, as Perth Airport was then known. And I found myself checked out to fly the Anson. I did my first flight. Oh yes, I missed a stage really. The Ansons that we worked on with A&A were sold at a very cheap price, of course, after the war, and McRoberts and Miller bought 5 of them. I think it was 5. Is that right, John? All right. Anyway, I think it was 5, and they were converted to passenger. That's the another Air Force one. The Air Force designations, by the way, were mainly W something or other, or W something or other numbers, which was an English a numbering system. But this particular one here, A443, is Australian Air Force designation. That aeroplane, by the way, you can see clearly the engine cowls, which are the original.